It's always fun.
It's always fun, and it's iBookBinding's live stream.
Somewhere.
Finally, we are here. Thank you, everybody who stayed with us through this, strange period of 15 minutes of darkness.
Is it already? That has flown by, hasn't it?
So, today we have Mark Cockram. And probably we will discuss this recent Booker Prize binding. Yeah. At least that's the plan. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I'm a bit lost, because of all of this stuff that happened to me in the past 25 minutes. But we definitely will have some fun. I think Mark is our most frequent guest, besides Pavel, of course, who isn't guest.
Of course. Well, yeah. Well, it's very kind of. Well, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's always enjoyable.
We'll see.
How could it possibly be a bad thing? Come on.
No, exactly. How can that be bad? Exactly. And it gives me a break from work and everything to sit down, have a cup of
on Saturday, because
on a Saturday, yes, when I'm not busy knocking down walls or anything like that. Yeah, of course, yeah.
And also you are presenting your new look. I really like what you're wearing.
Thank you very much indeed.
Where can I have one?
Well, funnily enough, if you don't wash what you're wearing, you can have something that looks like this in a couple of years' time. Completely free of charge. And it's good for the environment. You're not putting any detergents in the water system or anything like that. And I think it actually looks quite swish. Yeah. I mean, it's one of these. It's one of these things that if you do walk down the street wearing this sort of thing, people will stop and look.
That's what I wanted to ask. I understand it's good for the environment, but how good is it for your social life?
It's absolutely fantastic. I can get a seat anywhere I want. I just walk into anywhere, and all of a sudden space becomes available. I don't know why. It's just that. Well, I'm a charismatic guy. I mean, obviously and that's the way it is. So,
my lovely wife just asked me earlier today. She looked at my pants and she was like, "What's the dirt on your pants? What's happening there?" By the way, she says hi, Mark.
That's nice. Can I just interject for our English people? Pants means trousers, not underwear.
Okay, trousers.
Okay.
So that was awkward.
Trousers. and I was like, well, I'm using chisels quite a lot in my work, and when I sharpen the chisel, I just brush away, this small metal dust that appears on the chisel on my trousers, and that's how I work. That's my working trousers. And she's like, right. I was like, well, I can always wash them, or I can use black ones.
You could do, or you could wear an apron. How's that?
Guys, I haven't been to a more working class conversation in a while.
That's too complicated. Wearing an apron, that's too much. So anyway, Pavel, our regular co-host. Hi, Pavel. Pavel is joining us from Serbia, from Belgrade. Are you in Serbia?
Belgrade.
Are you in Belgrade?
Yes, I'm in Belgrade, right?
I'm Stepan.
Cool.
I'm currently in Windsor, Berkshire.
Okay.
And and here is Mark Cockram. Mark is probably in London, right, Mark?
Yeah, I'm in Studio 5 in Southwest London. Not as posh as where you are, but hey, somebody's got to slum it. I understand the King's your next door neighbour.
Yeah, sorry. There are too many crowns in the central Windsor. What that's what I can say.
Yes.
Too many crowns. So
I hear there are quite a few internationally thought criminals in your neighborhood.
Oh yeah. A bit too, I guess, southeast from us. Yeah. We wouldn't talk about it because we can get banned, on YouTube. We don't want that. Anyway, as usual, please, if you are willing to share your location with us, it will be so nice. We're always happy to see from where people join us, from which country and which city, town, village, or any other locality. And also, if you have any questions, to Mark about the stuff we are going to discuss today, or maybe any other questions related to bookbinding and book art, please post them in the comments and we'll try to answer them. Or we'll keep them for our next guest. And that's that. Let's start with our today's topic. So there is this thing, that Booker Prize Awards, that happens every year.
What's that?
Yeah, and
the Booker.
There are supposedly 6 shortlisted books every year, and for these 6 books, fellows of Designer Bookbinding are asked to make fine binding, and Mark was one of the bookbinders who made the binding for one of the 6 shortlisted books this year. That's not the first time Mark does that, but probably the first time for this book.
Okay, yes, it was. It was great. I mean, the Booker Prize, it's been going since 1969, so I think it's one of the longest winning literary award things there is. And for the last 30 years or thereabouts, the fellows of Designer Bookbinders have been asked to bind the shortlisted finalists, if you like. And normally we get, 4 or 5 weeks to bind a book. Now, I know for a lot of people, 4 or 5 weeks sounds a very long time.
Yeah.
It would be if you're a mate, but however, the thing is with it is you're under a lot of pressure. You're sort of under contract to do it because the book forms part of the finalists' prize, and so if the book isn't there, they've only got half the prize, you see. And also, unlike binding a copy of Shakespeare, you actually meet the author, have a drink with them, maybe a canapé or two at the event, and you sat on the table with them, all the cameras are there and everybody's being very shishy and very suave and sophisticated, and then there's somebody like me there, and it's absolutely fantastic
in your attire.
Oh yes, in pants, trousers and everything else. And so what it is basically, you get, first of all, on the day the shortlist comes out, and I don't have a clue which author I'm going to get. I don't want to think about it because I want to keep my mind open and everything else. And this year, my sort of author was Jonathan Escoffery, If I Survive You. Quite an interesting collection, 8 short stories about basically 2 brothers and the competition, sibling rivalry, family trouble, strife, and everything else. And so because you're sitting at the table with the author, you can't just do something abstract and say, well, what do you mean you can't see what the design is? You've actually got to read the book. And I read it 3, 4, 5 times on the bus, in the pub and everything else. And one starts to, and I don't know if you can pick this up on camera, but you start reading it and you start sort of making notes, getting design ideas and everything else in the reading copy. Now,
that was nice. I want to see it again. What's happening there?
I expect outrage.
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing? What are you doing writing in a book? Well, it makes it a unique copy, so there. So, and sort of read it, and that's where the ideas start coming, because rather like a landscape artist, as a designer, bookbinder, or whatever, I take my inspiration from the word, from a phrase, from a feeling that's conjured up and everything else. And just as an artist will alter their palette or alter the view or decide what's important to draw out of what they're seeing and put down on the canvas, I do the same thing for the binding of the book. So after reading it, digesting it and going through design possibilities and everything else, one starts on the construction of it, and it's not just, you don't just get the book and then you just take the cover off and put a new cover on.
It's not how you do it. Wow.
No.
Why not?
It's a little bit more complicated than that, guys. Okay. Just a little bit.
So there should be some planning, I guess.
But yeah, you've got to do that, yeah. And basically, when the reading copy arrives, you get sheets, and the sheets have been specially printed, so they're on really good quality paper, beautifully printed and everything. It's not your high street model, it's more your catwalk model sort of thing. And then the sheets have to be folded, and you're making the end papers. And I'm sure for bookbinding people, that's relatively, we know what we're talking about. But we literally start from the bottom and work out making the book. We don't start with an existing text block, as it were. So all of these things obviously take time, and then you've got to think about the design, and then we go through various manifestations of design ideas, ways of working, and trying out different materials to achieve the results, the aesthetic. But along with the aesthetic, of course, we have the construction and the durability of the materials and everything else to think about. And so for this one, what I decided to do after a little bit of a sort of, some people would say I was playing, I call it work. I was doing some experimentation, and I decided that what I would use is palimpsest parchment. Now, palimpsest parchment is basically a reused parchment.
Before we dive deeper into palimpsest parchment, because that's one of our favorite topics here on our podcast and live stream, I need to insert a shameless plug.
and also, no problem.
Continue to talk about trousers, pants, and other stuff. So
that was seamlessly done.
Firstly, we already have a series of videos dedicated to Booker prize bindings, and I think there are something like 10 of them already on our channel, and all of them are quite fun and insightful. So I just posted a link both on Facebook and YouTube. Not on Instagram, sorry about that, but you'll have to go to our YouTube channel and search for it manually.
Yep.
But we have a how you call it, playlist of videos prepared for you. So just spend, I don't know, 10 hours or so watching beautiful bindings and amazing book bindings, talking about them. That's the first thing. And also, we have some comments already on YouTube, not on Facebook. Strangely, we need to see some comments on Facebook as well. So, I'll read them and I'll return to Mark. Handfleet, yay, hello all, greetings from rainy Lancaster, United Kingdom. Then, Nottingham Book Arts Festival, not Book Arts Festival, Nottingham, UK, of course. Marta Vertecchi, I guess it should be Marta Vertecchi, or Vertecci, sorry, I'm butchering
Vertecchi,
as usual.
It's Italian.
It should be, but hello from Cologne.
Cologne.
Yeah, Germany.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful cathedral.
Adeline Ko, hello. It's past midnight here in Taiwan, but so lovely to see you, Mark. And nice to have Adeline here among our viewers. That's quite amazing.
Hi, Adeline.
Prosto Jean, hello from Quebec.
It's Prosto Jean, and it's my husband.
Prosto.
In case you were wondering. Yeah.
Oh, Prosto Jean.
So, hi, Vanya. Yeah.
Hi, Vanya. Nice to have you here as well. Is he also drinking?
It's a bit too early there.
Is there such a thing as too early? So we have different links in the description. You can check Mark's different websites and social media accounts. Please do that. Subscribe to some of them. We also have a link
I highly recommend Mark's Facebook. Mark's Facebook is something amazing. Yeah.
There is also a link to Designer Bookbinders, of course, and also a link to Booker Prize as well. And Mark has a really interesting Facebook account, and by the way, do you continue streaming live as you did before, or you stopped this practice? Because I don't think I've seen your lives recently.
I do, yes, but it's only when I've got something that I feel would be of interest. I'm not one of these people that will sort of live stream a sausage. And I'd say, this is what I'm eating.
I was absolutely sure that you will say, I'm not one of these people like you guys.
No, I would never say that. I've never seen you film a sausage yet. But it's one of those things. I mean, you know, social media. I mean, I browse. I'm a herbivore browsing the field of social media, and you know, sometimes you come across everything. What they're just putting that on for the sake of putting it on, you know. And so what I try and do is I try and limit it to what I feel maybe of interest, or create a dialogue or whatever it is. But yeah, so I'm not every day filming stuff and say, today I am using a bone folder. It's called a bone folder because it's made of bone and we use it for folding.
But not always.
but not
and
always.
it's still bone folder.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a metal bone folder or a wooden bone folder.
Bone folder. Yeah, I know exactly. And sometimes I find myself saying this when somebody's around, and I have to catch myself and say, other materials are available, of course, though. It doesn't not necessarily have to be a bone. And it's quite one of the things. Anyway, yeah.
Oh, very informative.
Thank you.
One last bit.
I do try to
much educational content.
Yeah. One last bit. So we also have a link to our Discord channel, where, by the way, there is some activity recently. I'm quite happy that it continues to grow, and people are asking questions there and getting answers, which is even more surprising. Also, as I mentioned, our Patreon account, because, well, your support is quite important to us, and without it, we sometimes cannot pay to our researchers and editors. And also something else. There was something. Oh, yeah, sure. Like, share, and subscribe. That's really important, especially during the live stream. Thank you, Mark, for waiting.
That's all right.
Can I ask a question? So,
can I interrupt now? Finally?
Finally, yeah. So you said two things: that you read the book 5 times, and that you decided to use a palimpsest metaphor. How do the two connect? What in the book triggered you into use of this particular technique?
Right. Well, it's one of the when I was reading, I kept getting these pictures, these images of like ghosts from the past re-emerging, and because I've used Parchment before, I know that you can. It's a relatively transparent. You can make it fully transparent, of course, sort of material to use. So you can actually get what I call ghosted imagery or text coming through. And I don't know if you can see from this little example, probably not, but it takes dyes and gold and other materials beautifully. It's also got a very silky feel to it, which is really quite cool. And so it's also a very durable material. It's not terribly easy to work with. Every material has its limitations, its possibilities, and everything.
Maybe we should share some of the photos of the binding. Pavel, are you ready to do that?
Let's
yes.
Try.
That would be good, wouldn't it?
Which part? Which part would you like?
Well, they're all fantastic.
The last collection that I sent you, with lots of images on with white background and stuff. Or maybe Mark wants to show us something that he prepared for us.
I have prepared nothing.
Let's start with the photos that I sent, and then we'll continue to what Mark said.
Oh, look, somebody started script. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So basically what we're looking at is you can see what I mean by ghosted. Oh, you could see what we mean by ghosted imagery. So you can actually see beyond all these layers of color and tooling, the tooling, we can see these dark lines there. It's called cracked foil work, where you literally just crack the foil. What I wanted to do is create this sort of distressed feel and all sorts of things. So this is why the Parchment is so beautiful to work with, because it doesn't actually have a grain. You can do things like this without it disappearing, without the grain interfering with it. Plus it's a relative, what I call clean surface as well. It's rather like working on a white canvas. You can see these ghosted images coming through. And the design itself is sort of images of the past, all these sorts of things. And it's one of those, nice things. And also with the box, we get the color as well happening. We get the crack line work and everything else, because the box is quite important. You've got to make a display of it. You've got to make it shine and everything else. So it's one of those things. And again, it's an attachable binding technique. For those of us a technical bent, it's got a single needle minimalist end band in 3 colors. And the colors represent the flags of various countries like America, that's North America, of course, Jamaica, the sea, conflict, all these other things. And if you read the book, you'll understand the design. It's like anything else, you just look at this, okay, that looks nice, but to really get a grip with it, I suggest reading the book. It's 8 short stories, as I say, put together to form this really quite maze-like, if you like, or a sort of image of 2 brothers and a family in discord and harmony, There's funny bits, there's quirky bits, there's tragedy, there's death. I'm not going to give away the ending. I'm not a spoiler, but that's how it comes over. But it is great fun. And of course, one of the beauties is the other 5 finalists. They've got their book bound as well, and so we have this mini display of all the binders' work, and it is quite a wonderful thing, because you've got to imagine these have been done in 4 weeks, which is, usually books like this, they can take months to make, to design, to think through, and everything else. So these are really quite, sort of banging all the time. And it's a great thing to do. It's a great thing to be part of it. And I think within bookbinding, we need events like the Booker Prize, to highlight that the book is still a valid vehicle in our contemporary age, in our age now. And it's still valid and still works. So, yeah. But Palimpsest Parchment is a beautiful material to use. And it doesn't mean I go out and buy, deeds from a king or whatever it is and use those. I always try and acquire stuff that's damaged, so I'm not sort of defacing history, as it were. But of course, in the history of the book, bookbinders, book artists, we've always recycled stuff. There's nothing new in what I'm doing. So within that context, there is that sense of continuity, I suppose. And it's also an interesting material to work with, because you do get this, as I say, beautifully smooth surface. And I do, I always suggest to people, try different materials. Just don't stick with leather or calf or whatever it is. And there is far more to design and art or design binding than just leather and gold and a few onlays. There's a lot more we can do. It's like we do have color film now.
That's so great to hear. That surprisingly there is more to bookbinding than leather and gold, because I can quite enjoy some of the elaborate gold tooling projects that you can see from some of the bookbinders, and I can see why more inexperienced bookbinders try to thread that path and go in that direction. But it's, in my non-objective opinion, oftentimes it's a bit too much.
Yeah, I think it is one of the things. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong. I mean, full leather, lots of bling, etc., etc. It can look wonderful, but sometimes you see something and the person who's done it has obviously tried every technique there is in the book, try to get it on, or every technique on the one book, because it's a technical exercise. And yes, they go, oh, look at this, is fantastic. And you think, well, yeah, but if you'd only just stuck with one technique and really gone with that, it would have been far more coherent and everything else. And I mean, there are a number of bookbinders who just generally just repeat the same thing in a different color every time. And that's fantastic. Yes, we do need that. But I think we also need people that go out and push things forward and, try and experiment and just see how far it goes. I mean, we've come a long way since, cave painters, 75,000 years ago were blowing pigment over their hands. We've come a long way since then. And we've gone through so many different things, and why some people still go on about 19th century bindings as being the pinnacle of it. You think, well, that was just then, that was of that time.
Yeah.
And, the past is important. Yes, we do need that. But likewise, we still have to keep moving forward, like any creative art or design or anything else. We've got to keep, seeing what's on the horizon, getting over the horizon and moving forward. So for me, I think, both have their place, both are valid, but I think I tend to work more in a now way than a then way.
I'll read a couple of more comments if that's okay, and return to that. Firstly, we have a comment on Instagram, which is quite amazing. Ziyade, I'm from Istanbul. And also, it's a bit hard for me to follow the comments on Instagram because of how Instagram works. But if you post there, I'll try to sift out your comment and read it. And if you have any questions, please post a comment. Also on YouTube, David Hennington, hi from Ottawa, Canada. And on Facebook, we have a comment on Facebook. That's fun. Loreto de Aquilado, hello Mark Cockram, greetings from the Philippines.
Hello, Loreto. Nice to see you. I will answer your email, don't worry.
Nothing
Okay.
like a bit of nothing like a bit of stalking in the evening. So
Yeah, no problem. No, it's we're working on something for next year. So yeah, I've got to get something over there. Yes. Anyway.
I should say that I quite enjoy. There are lots of things that I do not enjoy about the time we live in, but I quite enjoy the fact that you can really mix things from different styles, eras, and traditions. Well,
oh yeah,
it's harder with traditions, but anyway, and oftentimes nobody cares. I mean, just a few years ago, people would start to be angry, and you shouldn't be wearing stuff that was proper in 19th century or whatever. But sometimes now it starts to be okay, and that's great that you can mix everything, that you can experiment, and the society doesn't put unnecessary pressure on you, or well, at least much less pressure than it was 20, 30, 50 years ago.
Not that I'm old enough to remember that, of course.
Yeah. So yeah. Also, David Dickerson, hello from Kentucky, and we have a couple of questions. Handfleet, Mark, what about the end papers? How do you connect the end papers with book contents and cover? I guess that's a very issue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the book is a three-dimensional articulated structure, and there are many different planes to it. Now, for this particular book, because it basically starts off with it's very hard to describe, but normally I would do of quite a decorated or printed or colored end paper. But for this, what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a very definite break for once between the binding and the text block. And one way of doing that is to use a very simple end paper. Now, the end papers for this are just in a grey Hahnemühle paper, just a grey Hahnemühle. It's a beautiful paper to use with the leather jointed, going to edge do blurs. And that means that on the inside of the cover,
I don't think that there were photos of the end papers in the, and also not among your photos. Nothing.
No. They're very simple, and what they do is they it's almost like a counter from the color on the outside to this grayness, which is where the book starts and sorts of finishes, with this question of who am I, where am I, what am I. And so I wanted to create that just sort of that level of break, and it worked because it almost clears the mind almost. So that's it. But usually one way of sort of working with the design on the outside of the book is to sort of continue it in onto the inside by the doublures and the end papers. But if you look at the binding, there are elements of grey on the cover as well. So I've used black and white imagery, which comes through as grey through the parchment. So there is that link, if you like. I hope that answers the question.
It's a very interesting question in general, because I think, at least in my experience, it may be really hard to balance between the covers, the book block, and the end papers, all of these elements, and sometimes you also have edge decoration. And we know some great examples, some really nice bookbinders who do it really in a balanced way. But for me, I almost always did pretty simple end papers, and I just was a bit scared, to overdo it or something.
Well, with this particular book, what I did is I hand trimmed each section before sewing. So there isn't color on the edges, but there is a texture. That unfortunately doesn't show in the imagery, and it almost has the texture, you know, of corrugated iron, that corrugation. It almost has a ripple to it, and a very slight fuzziness to the edges as well, which again it relates to text that's in the text block itself. So there are links to it. It's not just putting down a marbled end paper and a blur with a bit of marbling to the edge. Not that, you know, there is great skill in that and everything else, but there's also a skill in actually keeping things simple. And I suppose it's that thing, you know, does you know, less mean more? Well, no, it just means there's less of what there is, but what you see more of it, because and what you've got, and if you can't hide things with edge decoration, you know, you've got to be right. And I think there's that element to it as well, which I think is very, very important, because, you know, I think we've all done it as bookbinders. You know, you sort of make a little dink or something there and you think, I'll put an onlay on there, call it design work. You know, you get away with it. With this, you can't. It's got to be spot on, because there's no way one can hide anything. For example, using parchment, if you get the merest sort of mark on it, it's there. You can't hide it. You know, so you've got to be spotless in preparation and everything else. But it's like anything else, you get used to the materials you're working with. Yeah, it's one of those things.
A couple of more comments, and I will pass the word to Pavel, because I think he has some questions as well. So we have almost people saying thanks, and, you know, from where they are joining us. But lovely. That's also really fun. But we really want to see some more questions. And thank you, Han, by the way, for your question. So Eleni Filio, again. How nice to see people laugh from heart. That's absolutely true. Greeting from Athens, Greece. Nice to have someone from Greece here today with us. Bob Census from Boston. Thank you all. Daria Welch-Filber, hello from Merida, Yucatan. Mark, beautiful binding, congratulations. And Daria is also one of our regular viewers. Nice to have you here. And then, Han please says thank you for answering his questions. Please share more questions, and we'll try to answer them, or Mark will try to answer them. Pasha, now it's your turn.
Keep them, just keep the questions very, very simple, please.
You also missed a hi from Ottawa, Canada, from the Hampton, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I can't see you again. And oh, yeah. So, Mark, I wanted to get back to one point.
Oh, sorry, hang on a second. So, whoa, sorry, I've got to. Whoa. Sorry, I've got to.
Something happening.
Whoa.
What's happening?
I'm terribly sorry about that. My music keeps coming up.
At least we don't hear it.
We don't hear it, so it's
don't
okay.
You? Oh, you're very lucky, because I do. And that was a company, a group that usually goes by 4 letters, ABBA, and it was a Queen dancing, and that was quite interesting.
Maybe we should just, start dancing.
And now I have a wonderful taste.
That's very kind of you, thank you. But it's more of a thing, because I've actually now lost my screen, but I can still talk,
and we can still see you.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So, Mark,
yes,
I wanted to get back to one thing you mentioned about how we are no longer in the Stone Age and cave paintings and all that. I immediately remembered a couple of quotes. One from David Graham Dixon, who said that cave art was like a fowl of a deer. It was born running. And another quote from Sister Wendy, I guess you remember her. She was an art historian nun, for those of our listeners who don't know. So she started her most famous series on art, saying, art always develops art always changed, but it never got better. I mean, it has always been good from the very start.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't but disagree with you.
Well, no, I mean, I think this is one of the things. I mean, we live in the age we live in, and when works from an earlier period, we look at them now, we may think, well, that's pretty naive or whatever. But at the time of that making, of the doing, that was the, if you like, the zenith. That was it. And obviously, like anything else, we move on and we move on and we move on. It's like looking at cars from the 1920s. They were the thing. And if you look at the action series of 30s, like the Flash Gordon and stuff, everybody's wearing fashions of the 1930s and all of that, because they think this is going to be, they look fantastic. I love the men in tights. And it is one of these things where you think, wow, it's great. And I agree, it hasn't improved. It is what it is. And I wholeheartedly nod my head, yes, in a sage-like manner. Mm.
But also another thing I wanted to ask you, when I look at these images, especially this one, and you look at it from all sides,
I'm sorry, I can't actually see.
But you know what it looks like, yeah?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So my impression is perhaps if I saw it in person, that impression would be different. But it's like you're trying to make it not looking like it's made of vellum or parchment, like there is this contradiction. It is a very traditional material, and
yes,
lots of techniques are traditional, like printing on vellum hasn't exactly appeared just now, yeah. But you get at the effect that is very contemporary, very modern, very now. Is it just because you are very contemporary and very now, or is it because of you're trying to develop an effect like that?
No, I'm just using the parchment as a carrier. I mean, it's like a canvas artist working on canvas. They're covering it with paint, so it doesn't necessarily look like canvas or wood or whatever people use. It's the properties of the material that I try and exploit to get where I want to be with it. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
It's basically what I did, whatever material I'm using, whether it be parchment, vellum, calf, leather, paper, whatever it is, I use it because I get the results I want from using it. But it's also because the book is one of these not unique, but it's one of these things that actually only comes alive in the hand. And there's that tactile element to it as well. And parchment, it's smooth, it feels flesh-like almost. It's almost as one is holding somebody's hand. And I wanted to get that as well, because it's the book is made for holding. And that's where I feel a material like parchment, like vellum, really does come into its own because of that, the unique nature of it.
Why? Why do you think that this particular part of the experience is so crucial to the book? I mean, it's sort of a sculpture. I mean, you don't need to touch sculptures to appreciate him.
Ow.
Music again? Or we are too loud?
I think we lost Mark for a moment.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I just had a problem with my computer. Why do I think it's important for the book to be held in the hand?
I mean, we in one of our previous talks we talked about how books are similar to sculptures and other three-dimensional art forms. But for the sculpture, for the most part, it's not crucial to touch it to appreciate it. But book is different.
Yeah, the book is very different. Yes, in that. When you're looking at it within the context of just looking at the book, yes, we can appreciate the sculptural quality of it and everything else. But because the book is multifaceted, to actually really engage with it, you've got to pick it up. You've got to somehow turn the pages. You've got to be part of that process of the working of the book. And I think that's where it becomes quite unique and very, very special. And for me, that's how I feel it works. Does that make sense?
Pasha, are you switching to? Yeah, you're returning to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, can you still not see what I'm sharing?
At the moment, I'm looking at a screen that's got a couple of pages, some offcuts of stuff.
So you can see.
What could it possibly be?
So I can see, yes.
I read another comment as we have a sort of a pause in our discussion. Victoria Caruthers, hello from Massachusetts, United States. And I think Victoria is also one of our regular viewers. So good. Nice to have you here. Again, if any of you have any questions, please post them. It's always nice to answer questions. Well,
it is, yeah.
Most of the guests are happy to answer questions. Sometimes it can, be a problem. But
I'm very happy to answer questions. Yeah. You may not get the answer you want, or you thought you wanted. Well, I'm quite happy. I'm happy to answer anything.
So anyway, and also again, please check the links in the description. Subscribe, like, share, especially share. We have a nice crowd of viewers today, much more than the previous time. So that's great as well. I guess it's because Pavel wasn't able to join us last time, and nobody wanted to watch me talking to somebody.
So Mark, what are we looking at? So some of these are pages and other.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But basically, what happens is, as I mentioned, I get delivered a box full of just printed sheets, which I then have to fold into sections, which are then sort of pressed overnight and everything else. And then in each section is individually trimmed. So what we can see on the right-hand side of the image is the leftover. And you can see as part of some of the trim lines and everything else. So there are parameters one has to work with. But that's what we can see there. And it's, if you like, the beginning of the making process. And one of the key things here is actually folding the sheets in the correct way, so that the numbers do follow page numbers do follow one on from the other. Because
do tell, you must have made that mistake at least once.
I think we've all made it just the once at some time or other. Not on this book, though. Not on this one. It was many years ago. Somebody had their work published. And they wanted 5 specially bound copies, and they came to me, and I said, "Yeah, I'd be delighted to do that." And so I did it. It came about, and they got this guy came back 2 hours later, and he said, "I think you may have got a section in the wrong way round or something." I went, "Oh my God." Fortunately, it was relatively easy for me to sort out. Yes, you only make that mistake once. And since then, I've double checked, check again, etc., etc., etc. Because, anyway. But then now in this image here, it's part of the sewing technique. I'm using an unsupported link stitch, using, linen thread, beeswax, and the like. And again, this is where the book begins to take form. We can see elements of the structure happening, and and it's also, for me, the sewing is quite a contemplative moment, because what I can do is I can think about the next steps, the next stages, how the design is going to be coming together, which is really very, very cool.
And no sewing station.
That's what I wanted to ask. Sewing frame, because there is definitely this divide between some of the bookbinders. Some of them say that, "Oh, I always use a sewing frame," and others say, "Oh, I never use a sewing frame. I just don't like it at all." Are you, doing both?
I like having both my eyes. I don't like using a sewing frame, so I actually can't get close to the work.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you're, it depends what you're used to. And with this particular binding style, with this unsupported link stitch, I don't like using tapes because I think they put, for various reasons, stress and strain on the spine. What I do use is a technique called secondary sewing, where the whole of the spine is lined with Fraynot or aero linen or whatever, and then the sections are re-sewn onto that. That's obviously after rounding and backing, so that the stresses and strains of the book are not just limited to where the tapes or the cords are. It's spread out along the full length of the shoulder, and plus you don't get lumps and bumps from tapes and cords. So the book opens with a nice clean line. I'm sure we've all seen it when we look at older books, that where the tapes or the cords are, the leather or whatever covering materials, that's begin to wear or become worn first of all. And when that starts degrading, then you've got potential weaknesses. That's what I feel. And it's a technique that works for me. And having looked back on some of my earlier work from 40 years ago now, everything's still sound with it. I suppose it depends what you're used to. Having said that, of course, if I'm doing historical structure, with cords,
like raised bands and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Then I will be using a sewing frame because that's basically the only way of doing it, of keeping the cords nice and taut. So it is one of those things. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. At the same time, you have a nice collection of sewing frames.
Yeah,
You showed me this huge sewing frame from what was it from?
The British Library.
Yeah, British Library.
Yeah, it stands about 4 foot, about a meter 20.
Yeah,
it's quite a substantial piece of kit.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, when am I ever going to use this? But use it I will. At some time or other.
Chronicles, or what was it? You told the story about making a ginormous book.
Oh, yeah.
You also use something like a 2-meter tall sewing frame?
No, what we used was, this angle iron stuff that you can bolt together. That's what we used. It was we the guy I was working with, Patrick Galroux, we coupled this thing that looked like a giant Meccano kit, if you like, of a sewing frame. It worked. Much to
that's the most important thing.
It worked. Doesn't matter what it looks like, it works. And I've lost the image again. I've lost the screen again, guys. I do apologize about this.
And what about what's the story behind the British Library sewing frame? How did you get that?
Yeah, quite. Yes. That's a difficult question, isn't it? How do I answer? Right. A few years ago, the British Library, the bindery at the British Library was having a sale of equipment they weren't using, and basically, a student, not one of my students, somebody else's students, bought it, and they from the auction sale, they couldn't find a use for it, so they gave it to me in the vague hope that I would find a use for it.
Have you at least one?
You can show it to your guests,
Yeah, I do. It's quite large. I get it out when I have people around. I put it on the desk and I say, look at the size of that. It's big, isn't it? And everybody goes, oh yeah, that is a big one. And it's sort of people don't know what to say when they see it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Where does the conversation go from there?
well, in any direction it goes, it just goes there. It flows naturally from there, Pavel. It really does.
By the way,
related to size and all
something you mentioned about the art from the previous ages, and sometimes you find art that is, you look at it and it's like it's still perfect, even from, I don't know, several thousand years ago. So, what's the predicted lifetime of this binding, for example?
Oh, that's a question, isn't it? I mean, parchment is a very resilient material.
Also talking about wear and tear, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it like anything else, nothing is going to last forever. The planet will eventually cease to exist at some time or other. And I think it depends on, like anything, how it's used and how it's kept. I quite often I'm asked this question from, funnily enough, from conservators. And I always say, well, if it's treated with care and respect, then it will last 200 years before perhaps it needs looking at, maybe restoring, conserving. We've got to give conservators a job. And it's also
in 200 years. That's yeah, job exactly. Security for you.
It is. I'm planning ahead, you see. I'm planning ahead. Now, if Jonathan, because it's now his book, chooses to burn it, that's up to him. If he chooses to give it to his Rottweiler dog as a play toy, that's entirely up to him. I have no say in it. And as far as durability of materials, I mean, vellum and parchment have proven track records. And I suppose we could equate it to the great Omar, the binding by Sutcliffe, Zaehnsdorf and Zangorski, I think, that it took apparently 3 years to do. Now, I don't think they were working on it continually for 3 years, but from design to the finished thing, it took, 3 years or whatever it was. And a thing of beauty and joy, all these beautiful precious stones. And of course, it went down with the Titanic. So that didn't last that long, did it? Whereas a foot soldier's diptych from the Romano-British era 2,000 years ago has survived. So it all depends on so many variables that it's very difficult. As far as the design surviving, well, I think we touched on it earlier with, when we look at, the clothes of the 1930s or whatever, it will be of its time. It will be of that moment. It will be a snapshot, if you like. But because the various stories, the contents of the book are of this time, the two will marry together. I mean, if I were to do, If I Survive You by Jonathan Scoffrey in a 19th century style binding, raised bands, gold tooling, panel work, an Oxford panel, something like that, there would be an imbalance, a serious imbalance. It will survive as long as people look at it, I suppose, or engage with it.
Well, it depends on the materials. I read a big article recently about how they conserve bindings that incorporate plastic. Yeah. Because that seemed like a good idea in the 70s and 80s, and now we know that most of the old plastics don't survive as well. If it's not Bakelite, say.
It is an issue because I don't envy conservators or restorers or people that work within that sphere of our world, because you've got a huge problem. I mean, for example, if you're working with looking at artists' books, and the artist has used sellotape to adhere an image or whatever it is to the book or the binding or whatever the page is, obviously the sellotape is going to degrade, it's going to leach, the adhesive is going to leach and all that sort of thing. And eventually the film, that sellotape film, or pressure sensitive adhesive tape, other brands are available, is going to come off. Now, as a conservator restorer, do you replace that pressure sensitive tape or with another pressure sensitive tape, or a repair paper that looks like, can you see the dichotomy that we have here? And I think it is difficult. I think that with contemporary materials, they're fantastic, but we don't know long term, which is why I sort, not as default, but I always think about materials that do have a proven track record, and I think that's sometimes very important. So from the longevity of it, I'm pretty sure that my parchment is going to still be around in 200 years time. I mean, I've got stuff from 1661 or whatever it is, a royal charter from 1661 that is still usable. You know, it's not that I would reuse that, of course. It's got the king's seal on it and everything else, but you know, again, it's this essence of finding a balance.
And what about the printing techniques? Because I know the parchment will survive unless it's on Titanic, or I don't know, on a flight to space.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what about the colors? What about the designs? We're currently looking at these ethereal photographs that you put on the binding.
Yeah.
And I look at them and I imagine that you need to really think about how you keep this thing for all those subtleties to survive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, again, like any canvas art or anything like that, you know, you do have to be aware that if you do leave it in bright sunlight, then it will alter. That's, you know, that will happen. I mean, I suppose that's one of the reasons why a box is always made for the books. You know, I always make boxes for books, and I think that's very important. And it's, you know, you look at anything that's been left out in the sun, and you will see that it's bleached, and some colors do go far quicker than others, blues, reds, that sort of thing, because of the absorbency levels. So yeah, you do have to take that into consideration, but as I say, if treated with a little bit of respect and care and that sort of thing, it will still be okay.
So I assume you would be still okay if the owner buried this book for a couple of months.
I'd be more than happy. No,
I remember that you only bury the books that you make.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Other people can bury the books you make.
I'm sure that somewhere or other somebody has buried one of my books. Yes, either with comments or a criticism, or physically buried it one way or the other. Yes. No, I mean, again, you know, when the book ceases to be mine, it becomes somebody else's. It's their property. I can suggest perhaps how to keep it for, you know, longevity or anything, but ultimately it's up to the person who owns it. I mean, if you want something to survive, anything, I guess, apart from cheese, of course, but if you put it in a you know, lead lined sort of container in a bunker that's 50 foot underground, and it's hermetically, you know, and all the, you know, sort of air conditioning and all of these other things and everything else, you put it underground, for me it ceases to exist. You know, what's the point of making it if nobody can see it or be part of it? And I'd far sooner the book be enjoyed for a shorter lifetime or lifespan, perhaps, by people than be enjoyed by nobody for a long time.
Pasha, I'm sending you a bunch of photos to show this ginormous
I'll need to,
sewing frame.
I'll need to reshare.
Yeah.
I
there will be
sharing for a bit.
There will be even more photos there. But anyway, yeah. Let me.
Again, guys, sorry, I've lost the page. I'll be back.
It will be back soon. It should be fine.
Oh, look at those look at those pants. Look at the size of that. So now you understand what I mean by look at the size of it.
And you are a very big man.
I am over 6 foot tall. Yes, I know. The cupboards on the wall are very deceptive. Very deceptive. But yes, that's the size of my frame.
It's much bigger than I thought. It's like absurdly big.
Yeah, that's what you see when you're doing extreme sewing. I could surf on that and sew a text block up at the same time.
You can browse through the photos, because there's one of assembled and placed on a table. So
yeah,
I'm trying to imagine what kind of book you'd saw on that one. Something like Audubon's Birds of America?
No, it'd have to be a lot thinner than that, because if you look at the width of the sewing frame, it's not that. There's not a lot of width there. I suppose you could call it, you know, Great Straight Roads of the World. That would make a nice book to bind in it. Or, you know, the Book of Spaghetti. You know, I think that would look great. And it's got very handy how to use it sort of pasted labels on, which of course, you know, at some time were very, very, very important.
Oh, it
to
looks
somebody.
so mathematical, you know, the knots theory and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Something many bookbinders struggle with, by the way.
Yes, indeed. I mean, that is as clear as anything, isn't it? On how to do something to do with 2 lines. And how
Sorry,
to use keys.
is it clear? I'm closing my eyes and all I remember is just...
I think if you squint and look at it from a distance, it's
a 3-dimensional
like a
image
penis.
appears.
I'm sorry, but it looks like a penis.
I was actually gonna say it looks like an upside down mushroom. Now you've ruined that for everybody, haven't you? If your great Uncle Charlie looks like that, then I'm not saying anything. But there you go. That's
yeah.
So that's the size of my sewing frame.
Sorry,
it's still
broke.
downloading or whatever.
Yeah.
There are some more photos there.
Oh, that's
I know.
Anyway, let me read a couple of comments and questions, and maybe Pavel will show a bit more photos, because there are some more photos from Mark's studio, which is also nice to share. Maybe if Mark is okay with that.
Just a second.
We have already published them a couple of years ago.
I know.
So nothing
yeah,
new
exactly.
there.
I mean, nothing to see. Move on. Move along.
So Pavel is returning to us. Okay. Eleni from Greece writes, I make my own notebooks. Can you tell me how to put a heading on bound books, binding cloth? With a marker, it's not pretty. Any ideas? I hope you can understand my question. Unfortunately, I cannot post a photo here. But I guess...
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Do you,
Please putting titles on bindings, especially covered with cloth.
Right. Okay. That's a very interesting question. Of course, always depends what sort of equipment you've got, and it's lovely to have a blocking machine and type holders and type and everything else. But again, you work within the limitations or what you have. And if we go back not too far long ago in the history of the book, the titles were actually handwritten on the foredge or the head or the tail of the text block. I mean, that's quite a common thing. And obviously with vellum and parchment bindings, which do lend themselves to writing, the titles were handwritten on. And I suppose in today's age where we do have the computer and everything's all neat and tidy and everything else, people like to have things in straight lines and everything. I suggest to people who are wanting that to actually look at old books, and you'll see that the titling is all over the place, misspelt, words missed out because there isn't enough space on the spine and all sorts of things. But recently what I have been doing with cloth bindings is, well, depending on what size you're working with, you can put it through a printer, so you can do that.
You should probably line it with paper. The cloth you should probably line with paper. If it's not cloth that is already lined with paper.
Yeah, but no, I've used just the ordinary book cloth, not paper lined or anything.
Yeah,
if it's a stiff book cloth, you can do that.
It's rather stiff because otherwise it wouldn't go through printer. But if it's not stiff book cloth, or if it's an ordinary cloth you just chose from, I don't know, wider market, you can always align it with paper, and then you can put it through printer.
Of course, yeah, exactly. I've also been using stencils and spray painting. That works really well, especially if you're wanting a gritty urban sort of feel to the work. And then there's also the other aspect
Pasha,
to it.
Are you switching off completely, or should I switch the scene? Or?
Sorry, switched off.
He switched off years ago.
I don't know what's going on.
And so there are many different things. It's basically what I have seen that works very, very well, and it's going back to sort of maybe kindergarten, or when you're at school when you're very young, are these rubber stamps that you can get, and you can just dip them in an ink pad and you just bang them on, and that can be extraordinarily, for me, very aesthetically pleasing and great fun as well.
You can find such a wide variety and assortment of these rubber stamps on flea markets and in other similar places, and it's such a boost to creativity. So
it is. Yeah, I mean, even a typewriter. I mean, I've got a few typewriters, and sometimes I'll put the book cloth through there and literally just title it with a typewriter. That works. I mean, so many people, they've got this idea of, the book must look like this because that's what every other book looks like. Yes, you could do that, but if you start looking back, and this is where we say, yeah, we always look back in history, we're working now, but whatever you can think of, invariably has already been done. And there's nothing wrong with handwriting a title on the book. I mean, I've just finished a week's tuition at Flatford Mill, a residential course, little plug there. And the first time I introduced students to gold foil is with a stylus, a heated stylus, so they can actually handwrite on the cover of their books. Then we move on to using a plastic stencil with the foil, so it gets a little bit more of a formal shape. But they actually really like going back to doing it hand because it is that unique nature of somebody's handwriting. And if you do look at books in the bookshop and you're looking at the titles, you'll see that it's not all just printed upper and lower case. A lot of books do have, cursive, all this other thing as well. But again, it depends what you're wanting. It really, really does. But again, it's like anything. The more you do, the better hopefully one will get. And it is one of those things. Again, this is one of the beauties of working with lighter colored materials like a white book cloth. You can put that down on board, and if you've got a printed paper on the white board, that printing will show through the book cloth, and it's faint, but you can still see it. And again, that creates a layer. There's so many different ways one can work with a book. Don't think of it as a book. Think of it as a series of planes or surfaces that need to be worked, or not, as the case may be. And of course, if you can get your hands on a printing press and some type, then you can start printing your title. And that's what we do anyway. I mean, if you go back to 1900, cloth bindings were printed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we sometimes forget that. We just see loads of foil and everything everywhere. And so I've been printing on book cloth, and recently I've got an example here. This is a 4 or 5 color lino print on book cloth.
Okay.
And and so you can use lino to do your titling with and all that. Why not? Books were. This is it. And I know people are saying, oh, it's not very traditional. Well, for me, tradition is sort of 100 years. And if we're in the 2020s, so a Victorian child's book with a printed cover, that would be traditional. Again, it depends how you interpret with the materials that you're using. And
if it's considered antique when it's 50 years old, or
exactly. Does that mean I'm an antique? What I would no, sorry. No. Sorry, no.
Don't answer that.
No. Does that mean I'll be an antique in a few years' time? I think not. But again, and it means, I mean, I've used oil-based printing ink because I'm a bit old school. But you can use acrylic. You can use all these things. The material, the things are there to be used. And the nice thing about using lino, of course, it's relatively inexpensive and it's relatively easy to use. You don't need a press. You can just rub through on the back and everything else, and you can do that. And that can be an extraordinarily effective way of using a medium. So, for example, if you've got a book that you've got lino printed imagery and things in, well, it would sort of make sense to use the same technique to perhaps do the cover as well. Why not? Go for it.
Even if you don't have a book that is connected in any way, you can still use lino print for it.
Of course, and why not? I think and again, go out, try these things,
and
of
also,
course, we are forgetting the most important thing at all. Nowadays, many people have a computer with a printer attached to it.
Yeah,
you can always make labels. And put
that's what I wanted to say, and you interrupted me, right? That's a punishment for me for interrupting all of our dozens and scores of guests throughout the years. Yeah, I wanted to say that if you want to go a bit more formal, you can always go with labels, and cloth covered bindings are that thing that probably you can use leather labels, you can use cloth labels, you can use paper labels, you can use almost anything with them, and it works. You can do it on lay. You can use inlays. You can do almost anything. Just be careful about the edges of the labels, because if it is fraying, it should be fraying on purpose. But
exactly,
in all other situations, it should be done. Nice.
And and if you've got an inkjet, I've got a laser printer and inkjet and whatever. If you're using inkjet, just seal it a little bit with. All right, you could use fixative or a matte varnish or a gloss varnish if you want to do whatever. But hairspray will do the same thing if you can't get hold of specialist sprays for fixing stuff. Hairspray will do it. So you use what you've got available. It's not. Don't wish for. Oh, I wish I had that. I wish I had that. Use what you can get and make it work for you.
And what about printing on aluminum foil? Because I remember a couple of years ago we talked about fireproof books.
Yes.
Remember that image.
Margaret Atwood. Yes.
Oh, she's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, she's a killer. Yeah.
So I remember mentioning the technique they used, and it was like $1 million printer that print on fireproof foil.
Yeah.
But nowadays. Those got much cheaper. Have you ever tried anything like that?
I have, and I have to say, I need to go back to it. So I don't think I was that successful. But of course, if you use metal paints, enamel paints and things like that, it is going to work. And there is, of course, a classic, and it is a classic book now, which I happen to have a copy of. If you excuse me for 30 seconds, I can get it. Can I get it?
I can read a couple of comments while you are.
A couple of very, very impressive comments. Please do.
I think we should do that when Mark comes back, because he doesn't hear us. But we have Julius, I guess, Chartel. Saludos. Nice to have you here. Daria Welsh-Wilbur wrote hilarious big sewing frame, and also. There was something about the and the Victoria Caruthers wrote lovely studio. That's I absolutely agree with that. And Mark's studio isn't very large, but it contains so many wonderful things. So it's always a great opportunity to visit Mark's studio, because it's such a fun place.
You're being very kind. That was not what you said you were here when you were here. You kept saying, "What have I put my foot in? What did that move?"
So yeah. Also, Daria Welsh-Wilbur wrote, "This discussion around experimentation is inspiring. Thank you." And that's why we invite Mark.
If we go back, anyway, there is an iconic book, and it's basically an exhibition catalogue, believe it or not. And I'm sure people are now going, "Oh yeah, I know what it is." It's the Museum of Modern Art and the Machine. Now, this is a metal book. Yeah.
Yes.
Now that's it's tin plated, silk screen printed, and I don't know if you can see the texture and stuff you've got on there.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
It's beautiful, isn't it? And again, we're looking at technique. We can see down this edge here, we've got these hinges. We can see the rivets and everything there. And I know people are going, "Oh dear, no, it's
are they actual
and stuff
rivets?
Like that?" But it is a very beautiful way of working, and it's a very beautiful style of binding, because it's single sheets joined together. Southeast Asian technique. Now, nobody goes on about stab sewn Southeast Asian technique being wrong. No, culturally, historically, materials wise, it's fine. And why not? This is sort of like a fusion binding, but we've got metal, and it's lovely, and it's mine. Did I pay that much for it? I must have been mad. But again,
it doesn't look cheap.
It's nothing in my studio looks cheap, Pavel. apart from me. But again, it fits the contents of the book. It's so suitable. And the book opens okay. All right, there will be the purist saying it doesn't open flat. Okay,
but
right,
it serves it fulfills the function. It works.
Yeah,
so,
it does. Yeah, and so when you look at it and you think about, we're talking about sculpture and everything else, it is spot on. It works. And again, why not? Why not do that? I mean, if you think about, contemporary binding, yes, people do have metal inlays and onlays. We have plastics, we have polymers, we have resins, we have all these other things. And let's face it, for a few hundred years now, we have been using metal with books. It's called gold leaf. And nobody says, oh, crikey, that's a bit strange. We've been at metal bosses, hinges, clasps, etc., etc., etc. It's just how we choose to interpret the materials and the mediums we're using. And why not? I mean, if we stick
and
with
also staples.
My favorite. My absolute favorite. You see, it depends what sort of staple you're using.
This beautiful rust on the spine.
No, maybe in other studios, but in Studio 5 we use gold staples.
Because you do. Speaking of flexing,
Pasha really wants to read a couple of comments.
I'm so impressed, and I wonder if you know the person who left the comments. So David Hennington tells us that he was an apprentice at Singorski and Sutcliffe back in the 50s.
Fantastic.
And he also mentions that he has worked on not one but 2 sets of James Audubon's Birds of America.
Fantastic.
Can you
that? No, I can't. No, I can't. No.
How could you? Oh.
I've been bested.
And
but seriously, no. I mean, this just shows, how the history and the continuity of the work and books and everything. It is that continuum. It is that way moving forward, because some of the books that were true, some of the bindings that SSZ were doing in the 50s were absolutely fantastic, again, of their time. And I'm sure that if SSZ, and I suppose in one way with Shepherds, they are still going, looking at their contemporary binding techniques, that it's still going on, it's still happening.
Well, Singorski and Radcliffe are still very much an active business. And speaking of things made in the 50s, we once discussed some very impressive bindings from that era for Tolkien. And I mean, you compare the very first bindings of theirs in what would become their style, from the early 20th century. Then you look at the books made in the 50s. Then you look at the books made now, and they're still extremely impressive.
Yeah, exactly. There is that continuum. There really, really is. And I'm in awe of people that can do that. I really am. It wouldn't take me 3 years. It would take me 30. I'm a realist in these things. And again, if you've got a team of people and each person is specializing in a particular aspect, and they're just concentrating just that one aspect for the whole working life, then yes, they will be very, very good at it. That's to be expected. But when you're a single person like me, then you work to your strengths, and you keep trying to get better and better and better. So there is this essence of, this is what, I do stand back and I go, yeah, you got me. Yeah, no problem.
There was this part of the comment, Pasha, about the Great Omar that you didn't read somehow, because I think it can be useful for our viewers if you read it.
David mentioned that there is a replica of the Great Omar reproduced by Stanley Bray on display in the British Museum.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah.
Wasn't it in the British Library? Probably British Museum.
This is it. I mean, one of them was bombed during the Second World War, One went down with the Titanic. It doesn't have a good track record, this particular input. Personally, if you're doing your household insurance, don't put, a list of contents, I have a great Omar. Don't put that down, because it does have a track record. That's all I'm saying.
There was a book produced just 10 years, no, even fewer, like 5 years later in Russia, in the same techniques, like Russian style, but very much Radcliffe.
Yeah.
And out of 250, we now know that about 50 burned, two perished in the ocean. So it's not just
it tracks.
Yeah, I'd be asking questions, and I'd see a pattern developing there. I really, really would. I'd be worried. That's all I'm saying. I'd be worried.
So we have some more questions. Should we go with them? Are you ready?
Yeah, cool. Yeah. What for me?
Let's see what we have here. Loreto Apilado, on putting labels, what kind of adhesive you are using? And that's by the way a great moment. I saw Mark react on to the word glue one time.
Again, it's one of these things. Which adhesive do you use for what materials or mediums? Adhesive, you see, and it depends. It depends on the sort of work you're doing. If you're putting a paper label on a cloth binding, then you don't want to be using something which is going to soak everywhere and soak through the paper, discoloring or marking or whatever. So perhaps paste would be out of it. And again, you've got to think about the bonding agent. Paste is more of a penetrative adhesive. And with a lot of the book cloths that we use nowadays, they tend to be mixes of man-made fibers or whatever. And so perhaps you're not going to get the adhesion that you require, and the paper label may peel off. Whereas but it penetrates the paper fiber slightly. And so perhaps you would think that maybe a PVA or EVA should be used, because that's more of a film or surface adhesive. Now that could work. And to be honest, if I'm doing addition work at a certain cost, one has to think about the cost of these things, then yes, I'll just use a standard bookbinders PVA, that sort of thing. However, perhaps the best of worlds would be a combination of the two adhesives, where you do get the penetrative side of paste, and you do get the flexibility of PVA, because paste, when it dries brittle. The bookbinders PVAs and EVAs dry very flexible, so you need that combination. The best thing I always suggest to people is to experiment with the materials you're using, which is going to work, which is going to get the best result. All it is a bit of book cloth, a little bit of paper, put them down, subject it once it's dry and the adhesives have dried to a little bit of the action it's going to be getting, and just see how stable it is. And if it works, it works. That's great. There's no problem at all. Again, it depends on what you're using. If you're using leathers and things like that, then again, you use an adhesive which is suitable for that. Having said that, I've in the past used many different sorts of adhesive. Egg white, that's an adhesive, of course. There's lots of different things that we can use that have been used in the past. It's, again, making use of what you've got. I hope that answered, Loretto. I hope that answers your question.
We also have another question that comes back to one thing I want to ask you. Is it really a palimpsest? And to put it in the words of Marta Bertecki, hi Mark, not sure if you already mentioned that, but were the human faces on the parchment kind of the original layer of the palimpsest? How do you scrape or wash them off?
Right, okay.
You didn't.
Right. What it basically, there's a number of different ways with working with this particular tech. So basically, it just so happens that I've got a couple of examples here. I know. Amazing. As if it's been planned. Basically, what I do is I buy old documents whenever I see them. Now, I don't go and do this with perfect condition documents and things like that. They've got to be damaged before I will use them, because I'm just that way inclined. And I know that some people say, oh, you're destroying history and everything else. There are seriously millions of these things, and to be honest, they're worthless. It's only from, a lot of interior designers use them to, put up on a wall and that sort of thing. But basically what one gets is you get your material, and the inks, some of the inks, the majority of the inks are actually water soluble. So what I do is I basically gently soak the parchment in a just off cold water. It's not warm. It's not lukewarm. It's just below lukewarm, because I've got sensitive hands. And I basically just gently, with a sponge, just gently clean the ink off, that sort of thing. I then got a very large piece of plywood. I think it's about 1 centimeter thick. And I literally staple gun it out. So as it dries taut, so it dries flat. It's rather like if you're, alum touring your own fish skin or frog skin or whatever. It's very much the similar process. I then let it dry maybe for 2-3 days, again, depending on the atmospheric condition and all these other things. And then I go ahead and use it. Now, as far as the imagery is concerned, the imagery is actually done on, how can I best describe it? On the reverse side of the parchment. So trying to get right. Okay. So for example, if this is the outside of the parchment, I will have put my imagery on the inside, if that makes sense, so that it's in reverse, as it were. Does that make sense? I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm not a bookbinder enough.
not for Kyle.
Do explain it again.
So sure, okay.
Print from parchment on parchment?
Oh, no. Okay, right, fine. Basically what it is, this is, for the imagery, it's a reverse transfer technique. You get a photocopy or a laser print or whatever it is. You lay that down onto your parchment, and then using a solvent, something like a screen wash or brush cleaner or something like that, you rub that on the back, and then with your bone folder you rub like billio, and it will transfer the ink onto your surface. And that's basically how it's done. Now you can put it on, if you like, the outside of the parchment, the outside of the book, or you can do it on the inside. So the outside would be this surface here, if you imagine that's the outside, or you can do it on the underside, so that it works that way. Of course, you can do it a very safe technique, which is basically cover your boards with a decorated paper and then just adhere your parchment to that, and that will get you the ghosting coming through as well. The best thing to do is just experiment, see what works, because some techniques that will work for one person and you get a specific end result. A different person will be using the same techniques but end up with something that's slightly different perhaps, and that's great. We don't all use the same finishing tool. We don't all end up with gouges, all of them. 10 binders using the same gouge will have the same shape, but how they apply the heat, the temperature, the dwell time, the material they're going through, it's palladium, silver, gold, whatever, we'll get a different result. And again, it's about using this. I mean, I just go for it, enjoy the moment. And when you're experimenting, when you're doing stuff, nothing's wrong. It just means you're a step. If it doesn't work, you don't get the results. It just means you're a step closer to where you want to be. You've just got to keep taking steps until you get where you want to be. And plus, on that journey, you will find stuff you think, I've got to remember that, because that, even though it's not right for this project, it'd be great for something else. So, one has to try and just go for it, I think, in a quiet way.
Yeah.
So do we have a time for one more question?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're paying for me by the minute. I'm happy to be in here as long as possible.
Okay. So, to my shame, only recently have I found your lecture in the Bodleian Library uploaded to YouTube.
Yes.
So I'm gonna post the link in the comments. But could you talk a bit about that experience? So that sounds like an exciting thing to do.
What lecture?
Yes, at
Uh,
Bodleian Library about
oh,
minimalist flat side back binding, whatever that is.
it's whatever that is. It's a
How
fantastic binder.
dare I?
How very dare you? No, it's a very simple but quite versatile way of bookbinding, and that I first started using it with art students because as a quite a quick way of creating a book that they can use that they didn't need any specialist equipment for. And you know, the average art student, forgive me, art students, their attention span is about 5 minutes. And so if you say to them, right, we're going to make a book, but it's going to take you 3 days just to make the book, they'll start slashing their wrists at lunchtime. So with this technique, and again, they don't need specialist equipment, it can be made. And the technique worked. And I thought, right, can I do something else with this? Can I make it better, more, whatever? So I experimented. You can do it with drum leaf text blocks, sewn text blocks, all sorts of different text blocks you can use with it. So it's versatile from that perspective. And what it does, it combines a historical technique with a contemporary way of working. And it could be contemporary materials or it could be traditional materials that are used. The concept is extraordinarily simple. And I urge people to go and see the video.
So do I.
It's quite good. Some of the questions are interesting at the end of it. Anyway, but basically it is great fun. It's a great thing. I was recently giving a talk and a lecture and a couple of workshops in Brisbane, Australia earlier this year. And I did a 2-day workshop on the minimalist flat type back binding. And they loved it because, again, all right, yes, you do need skill, and it's like anything else. You can make it quickly, and you can do it as a first timer, and you will get a result. Even experienced bookbinders, they're making it thinking, this is it. This could go. This is nice. I like this. Because again, you know, you do, you know, there are elements of skill involved in it. But basically, the minimalist flat type back is, and I've got a few knocking around somewhere, because I make them, but what it basically is and again, this is what I mean about using book cloth. This is book cloth, and I've put it through a printer and I've used stencil work on it. So that's quite easy. But as you can see, it's a flat back. Now, as beginners, we all make flat backs, but the spine has been covered with thin leather. So as an introduction to leather work, it's a nice thing. And then the boards are applied directly on. Because there's no shoulders, and because the spine is a tight back, i.e. the leather is directly onto the spine, it opens up quite beautifully. So you don't need any hinges or joint areas or anything else. The pages lay very nicely flat. So it's a great book to make. And again, you don't need that much specialist equipment, and you can sort of play with your material use. So because the boards are independent of each other, it means that you don't need huge pieces of cloth. So if you've got an A4 printer, for example, you can push your book cloth through the printer and cover each board independently, so it can have a unique way of looking at it. So you don't have to be the same at the front and the back. Plus also, you can either have made end papers or just ordinary end papers, tipped on end papers. Text block this is an unsupported link stitch sewn. And I always try and make, if I'm working on a new structure or something, I always make it into one of my notebooks or sketchbooks that's hammered, carried in my bag, opened, used as a coaster for a cup of tea, the lot, everything, just to see how it's going to last. Tea. All right. Okay, I may have the occasional alcoholic beverage. It would be churlish of me to say otherwise. But tea, coffee, other beverages are available, and it sort of holds together. And this has had a lot of action. It really has, and it's holding together. Yeah, okay. It perhaps not as strong as a wooden board binding with laced on boards with, you know, half a ship's rigging and everything else, but it's not meant to be like that. This is a, you know, quick-ish, depending which way you're doing it. But this is the basic model. But again, you can use this similar thing that does have leather joints, that does have sort of laminated board attachments and everything else. So it can be a very sophisticated binding style as well. It's like, you know, saying the case binding is a forerunner to library style, and not forerunner, but, you know, each one sort of meshes together somewhere along the line. So, you know, and it works, and I have great fun with it. I really do. And that's how I'm now making the majority, if not all, of my own books, sketchbooks, notebooks, that sort of thing. And it's also got quite a clean, modern, contemporary line to it. You know, it you know, when compares it to other structures, it's more a cleaner profile, shall we say, from that perspective. Not, you know, but there are other binding styles available, and each one have its merits, and each one has stuff that you think, whatever. So it depends what you want from a book and what you choose the book to be, I guess. But yeah, the lecture was great fun. It was hard work because I think it was the first sort of public, we call it a gig in the trade, gig I'd had done since COVID. So I was a little bit rusty, and trying to pack in the history of the technique that I was using, where it had come from, the rationale behind it, and physically making one all in under an hour was a challenge, but I like a challenge. It was good fun, and I think the audience enjoyed it. Yeah, it was great fun. I love doing that. It's you know, stand-up bookbinder, and why not? I can do that. Give me a mic and I'm away.
I had an amazing experience of making classes, workshops on different events made by the Jewish community in Moscow for kids.
Great stuff.
And it's sort of similar format when I had to make a book in under 1 hour, but with kids, and not to lose them throughout this hour, and also not to lose their parents, because that's also. But it's sort of sealed me to, you know, not to steal, how to say, Pasha, how to made me not so vulnerable to the stuff that I heard from my adult students later.
Yeah.
And in my personal opinion, adults are so much worse than kids.
Oh, of course they are.
What a shocking revelation!
It is honest, because
especially the ones that are older than the teacher.
Oh yeah, because they think just because of your age, you've got no experience and they know everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, a few years ago, as when I was sort of, it is now some years ago, I was giving a workshop, 2-day workshop. I forget where it was. I know if I did tell you, the person would know that I was talking about them. So I'm not going to tell you where it was. And there was one particular person there who had been bookbinding, darling, for many, many more years than you've been alive. And I was going, yeah, okay, right. So I was going through this and everything. And this person kept interrupting nearly every 5 minutes, saying, well, of course, I wouldn't do it that way. And I'm thinking, whoa, hang on, I've got to nip this in the bud as quickly as possible. And I said, well, you know, just how much experience do you have at bookbinding? And she said, oh, many, many, many years. And I was like, oh, that's great. I said, and I leaned over and I said, it's not the length of experience, it's the quality of experience that counts. Where did you study? And she said, oh, I've been to weekend workshops with this person. And I said, that's cool. I've been in full-time education for 7 years with this person, and this person, and this person, and this person. As I said, it's not the length of experience, it's the quality of experience. and you know, adults, that I use that term, I'm an adult myself, but people have this thing. Children, on the other hand, they can be so receptive. They take stuff in and they ask really good questions without bias, without trying to make them look better. Their questions are very honest and can be very insightful. And yeah, I love working with kids, younger people. I love it. I really do. Obviously with parental control and all the rest of it and everything else. But yeah, they can be great fun. And they'll take you down paths you didn't realize existed.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they're just, you know, I love it.
So it was already more than 90 minutes, and we'll start to wrap up now. If anybody has their last questions, short questions, you can still ask them, because I have my last question, and that probably it will be it. Also, again, please like, subscribe, share with all of your bookish and artisan craftsy people around you, because it's always fun to have more viewers each next time. And please check links to Mark's websites and social accounts. They are amazing. And there is something that we just started discussing before even Pavel joined us today, because I went to a thrift hunt earlier today, and I found a couple of I found multiple things, but two of them are books, and one of them is this one, which is quite fun, and it's Mickey Mouse Annual from 1930. So
I know a bookbinder could look after that for you.
It's the first Mickey Mouse Annual in the UK.
Brilliant.
And £20. Quite okay for that book.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good price. That's a good price.
And I thought that maybe I will finally return to bookbinding and the book repairs on iBookBinding, and make it a long-lasting project, because I don't have so much time for. But also another idea I had was to sort of create a joint project between several bookbinders, maybe, and share it, on social media, and try to bring more attention to it. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe I will ask somebody to help me with this book. But also there was another book that I bought, and it's also first edition, surprisingly. And it's this one, the girl's book of crafts from 1959. And I explained to Mark that I went on a rant in our family chat when I bought it, because in Russia, crafts and handcrafts, how you call handcrafts and education is
handicrafts.
Handicrafts, is so very gendered, and it became less gendered in 1990s, early 2000s, but now there is definitely a trend to returning to the girls should be making soups, cooking soups, and taking care of their husbands, and boys are drilling and doing woodworking and stuff, and I hate this separation. And but I was quite not surprised, but I was happy to see that in this book there are, it starts with sewing and embroidery and stuff like that, but then there is what have you here? Surprise, bookbinding. And then there is also something also quite nice, woodworking, and some other stuff, which is back in Russia considered to be, stuff for boys. And Mark also chipped in on that. And can you at least repeat some of your comments?
I think it's quite interesting, because when I was at school, obviously that wasn't so long ago. When I was at school, there was I did cookery lessons, I did needlework lessons, stuff, and the girls were doing woodwork, metalwork, mixed crafts, and that sort of thing. So, and why not? I think it's very, very important, and
I really enjoyed needlework in my childhood.
Yeah,
my grandmother made me to do cross stitching and all of that stuff, and
look how useful it's come. Yes. At least you can sew a button on now. That's the important thing.
In our family, I'm repairing stuff, not my wife. So it's really important.
That's okay. It's between us. Don't worry about it. But it is. I mean, nowadays you see so much stuff in charity shops because it's got a button missing. Now, if a button comes off my shirt, I sew it back on. And it's
probably in several months.
Well, I mean, and the thing is that particularly like the book you've got because it comes from what 1959, 1960.
1959. Yeah.
And I think that stuff like that. It just shows that there will be always perhaps the people that will go on about should we say gender specialization and stuff in jobs, in sort of perceptions of what life will have in store for you. But I think we've got to make of your life what it is, because none of us are going to be here forever. And I really like that book, that it does show girls working in what was, even at that time, a predominantly male orientated or perceived as a male occupation. I think it's very, very cool. And why not?
Yeah.
Great.
And that's something, by the way, we discussed with Kathy Abbott on our podcast with her experience in 1980s in a bookbindery. Where still in 1980s, women were sort of supposed to be, doing sewing, and that's it.
Yeah, they says, "Oh, love, could you just sew up these 10 text blocks for us?"
Yeah,
that's lovely. Thank you very much. And while you're at it, a cup of tea for all the lads. Thank you.
Yeah, she told us that they sat in a separate building and weren't supposed to mingle.
Yeah. How sad is it?
I'll post a link to Kathy's talk as well because
fantastic.
It was quite great to talk with her. So that's that. I think it was great. We had some really nice comments there. Loreto writes, "Thank you all, Mark. See you soon, mate." And
see you soon, mate.
Hanfleet, "Thank you all for your time. Fantastic live talk." David Pennington, thanks for an interesting session. Again, people liked it. There were some really nice questions.
Cool.
We'll definitely cut it into short pieces and put on TikTok, Instagram, and stuff, because that's what we do.
So everything that is even slightly incriminating will be
there
posted on TikTok, Mark. Yeah.
Thank you. I do appreciate that because I do have a reputation that I've got to keep up, and I did let one or two things slip.
So
not so good.
Unsponsorable.
That's that. We'll stay for a minute longer while the stream drops on all the platforms. But thanks for being with us. Thank you, Pavel, and see you next time. We don't have a next guest scheduled yet, but we'll probably get to something like 2-week schedule for now, because it was a rough period for us switching to Saturdays and lots of work and stuff. But we really want to return to regular live streams or whatever. So Pasha, please talk, and I'll be switching off.
Yeah, so have some good quality family time.